Hi there, everyone, and welcome to this month's Audio Production Town Hall. Once a month, we're here talking about subjects of interest to audio professionals. I like to describe this as kind of kibitzing on a water cooler conversation for audio nerds. And this month's conversation is literally that. Darren and I actually were standing around talking in the break room about a month ago and talking about a project that he's been working on, a couple of projects he's been working on recently. And I said, Darren, we need to talk about this at a town hall. He said, let's do it. So with that, welcome Darren Schneider, who is our course director of advanced session recording in the Recording Arts program. Glad you could be with us.
Thanks.
So you and I were talking about some things that you've been doing here on campus. So by way of background, you are course director, of course, but you also are the chief audio engineer at our audio temple here on campus.
Yep.
And you've actually done a slew of high-profile projects here in the last 2 or 3 years, right straight through the pandemic. How many different #1 plaques do we have hanging in the walls?
We did 22 in 4 years.
22
Yeah.
Billboard #1
Yep.
hits. So that's really impressive. But one of the projects that you were doing was while everyone else was hunkering down during the pandemic.
There were two of us here.
So there is a major folk Americana roots artist named Aoife O'Donovan. And she came in and basically did an old-fashioned lockout at the Audio Temple. And so you were working with her as she developed and recorded and mixed and surround mixed her Grammy-nominated project, Age of Apathy.
Yeah, so it was kind of an interesting start to the whole thing. One of the previous instructors who had retired from here, we were doing a opera thing, believe it or not, and we needed a cello player. And Keith Lay, who's a friend of both of ours, was like, hey, I know this guy plays cello, he's really good. And I was like, okay, cool, you trust Keith. And so Eric Jacobson came in, who is the director for the Orlando Philharmonic, plays with Yo-Yo Ma and a bunch of other people. And he said to me, he goes, well, my wife is an artist, and she's been looking for somewhere to record. And I think probably the first thing is that every opportunity can turn into something. I agreed to meet with her, thinking, oh yeah, this is, another musician's got somebody else that they're trying to pawn off or whatever. Well, anyways, I didn't know who she was at the time, and she came in, we met, we basically agreed it's more or less like dating. You get in the studio, we wanted to see if things were going to jive. If we were kind of at the same point of what we were looking for out of working together. The minute she started singing and playing, it was pretty obvious that I was in. And so we decided we were going to go into writing phase of a bunch of different projects we'd done over I guess this was late 21, so over like 2.5 years we've done like 70 songs. So we have been busy people. But so we started writing. We knew at some point that we were moving into writing an album, and we were going to bring in, and we did bring in, a producer, which is this guy named Joe Henry, which I ended up actually co-producing the record with her, engineering and mixing it. Everything we were doing as what we thought were demos, writing demos, doing ideas. Because of the Audio Temple, because of my background, her background, we were able to go full on basically songs. Wow. We don't do any rhythm stuff. We literally piano, vocals, electric guitar stuff. We try not to do any percussion. We work to click tracks. Mm-hmm. But everything we did ended up on this record that last year we had the 3 Grammy nominations for. So,
wow.
Yeah, and this was all during COVID, by the way. And one of the driving forces for both of us also was we streamed to, if you were a Full Sail student, you had access to FSO, you could just click a link, and I had 5 cameras. You got high-res audio from the Audio Temple. So everybody was able to literally sit and watch us write, work, record, watch her cut vocals, watch us comp vocals. Like we have feeds from both of my Pro Tools screens,
Right.
and then we have the cameras around the studio.
You also had a faculty member who was answering questions.
Yeah,
in real
so
time.
so my associate John Yandel was online and was able to interact. So what we wanted to provide for students, especially during COVID, because everybody's locked in their houses and couldn't be in the studio or whatever, for lack of a better term, this was the Big Brother camera. We were working at a pro pace, pro level, not explaining anything, and John was online, and if somebody said, hey, well, what mic are they using on the guitar? He could then be like, oh, well, that's this microphone, and why are they doing this? And that's why we're doing this. So it was a really good way for people to see how real sessions go. It's tough in a lab, you know, you stop a lot, you don't get to see the flow, you don't get to see what the artist demands from you. So it is really good to see real-time sessions from pro people. So, you know, both of us have, you know, pretty extensive track records, so we really did know what we were looking after as far as I should never get in her way. And it's kind of an interesting thing with producing, because I think there's this, especially with this style of music, there's a very misconceived thing that I'm supposed to jump in and tell her how to do this and tell her how to do that and whatnot. She is world-renowned songwriter.
Yeah.
You know, she has written for Alison Krauss and you know, everybody under the sun. And what really developed between the both of us was that she did her part and I did my part, and she doesn't, it's not she doesn't care, but like she trusts me 1,000%. I trust her that, you know, whatever writing move or melodic move, there's a purpose in. And it's a very interesting thing to watch us, because I mean, I was with Deep Purple for 10 years and worked with, you know, superstar rock bands that are great songwriters, and this is this weird kind of symbiotic thing that I'm thinking about what guitar sound she needs while she's playing a different one, so that I can just go in and punch it up real quick and it inspires her to do whatever. It's 50-50, you know, it really is. I mean, obviously, you know, she's got to write a hit song. I mean, that's, you know, and, you know, Americana also allows us to be a lot more creative, which is the thing I absolutely love about what we're doing now. Everything on Age of Apathy is real people, no sequencing, no auto-tune, no pocketing vocals. Everything, if it wasn't right, we recut it, made sure it was right. So it is as real a record, I think, as, you know, I've probably made in a long time.
Yeah, and not a bunch of bean counters from A&R telling you how it's supposed to go.
That's the weirdest thing. Nobody even talks to us.
Nice.
We just have a record, and, you know, it's, I mean, I'm sure behind the scenes there's probably a couple people hearing it here and there. Her manager, I've learned very quickly to stop asking, but I was like, hey, did you hear the new track we were working on? He's like, no, I don't hear them until they're done. And he's on the Dropbox.
Wow.
Like, he can see every single song that we have going on. It's really great. It's great to have the freedom. It's great that we, and she talks about this a lot as well. You know, as an artist, you get into this rut of tour, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever it is to make a record. You rush through that, you go back out on tour, you do the cycle. Well, COVID, when it hit, you know, she had never worked with somebody like me who's, I mean, been a spoiled brat pretty much my whole career, so it's like, I mean, I'd spent a year on a record, and, you know, she had never had the, you can just walk away today, it's okay, you know, and yeah, I think she's spoiled now too, because she's, you know, now it's a whole different ball game, but, you know, it really is a big factor in how that record came out. We also don't think we would have made the same record had we brought a band in, sat down with a rhythm section, chunked it out, recorded it, did some overdubs. It wouldn't have been the same animal. We were very conscious, and that's where Joe Henry, he's a 3, 4, 5-time Grammy-winning, you know, Americana producer. He's a big deal as well. I put him like the grandparent almost. Like, he was just there to be like, don't touch it. Like,
right.
That was the beauty of that. But he was also there to make sure that we never influenced Aoife and I didn't influence what the drummer did. You know, they would do a couple little takes. They'd give me some options on stuff, but it was pretty much we hired the right people. That's the first and foremost thing. So Age of Apathy has a drummer called Jay Belarus. He's with T-Bone Burnett and, you know, plays on a ton of stuff. Super creative guy. Like, doesn't play drums like normal people. He doesn't do the hi-hat, snare, kick thing. Everything is artistic. Everything is, you know, as I'm going to say weird, but in some cases very bizarre. You know, he's a percussionist. He's an artist, and it's hard to kind of register with drummers. You just think they're just going to go in there and, you know, crash out what they're going to do. So a guy named David Pilch played bass, who Jay and David had played together on numerous things. Ray LaMonte, a bunch of other artists like that. So they were already kind of locked, even though they weren't playing together. So during COVID, nobody played together. Yeah. That was the crazy thing, was I would create, you know, these, you know, vocal, piano, maybe acoustic, and I usually run effects and stuff on the guitars. You know, I kind of have the vision of what we want, and it has a feel so that when they get it, they're inspired by that feel. And then they put their parts on, send them back to me. Nobody hears it until after I suss out how I want the drums to sound. And then I add that drum part to that, then it goes to the bass player. Then it would, you know, I'll get massaged with that. And a guy who did the, some of the keyboards, Aoife played a lot of the piano stuff, but some of the piano string stuff is a guy named Patrick Warren, who he scores for T-Bone, and he, Boogie Nights and, you know, Shy, a bunch of other movies like that.
So there are a lot of different ways to make a record, a lot of different ways to make all the things come together, and this wasn't any of them. A lot of the time, an artist will bring in a demo, an acoustic demo they did, you know, on their phone or whatever, on their studio at home, and in Nashville, the band listens to it once, and then they play it, and it, you know, resembles it, but sounds, you know, they're making up all sorts of interesting parts along the way. Other times you have demo tracks over which layer after layer of real parts are added, and then at the end, the final vocals and so forth are done. You were playing me an example a minute ago of a tune where and it sounded to me as though this was kind of typical of your work process here, where the scratch vocals and acoustic guitar parts that you started with that everyone else added to ended up being essentially the final version. So if you've got, are you able to play us an example of something
absolutely.
like that?
I think the bigger picture is that you should always record as if it is the final.
There you go, yep.
It doesn't matter if it's the most creative sound, if it's clean, like so, and I've over the years gone backwards, as opposed to patching in, you know, 50 compressors on a vocal. I'm preamp to tape now, and when I say tape, I mean Pro Tools. I don't actually record to tape. Yeah. But I think it's really critical that if you, and you know, I don't get caught up in sample rates. I don't get caught up in any of that stuff. Everything is so good. 44-116 clean. Like if you don't distort a preamp, there's nothing you can't do with it.
Right.
The biggest thing is getting all the information you need. So I would say decent preamp, decent converter over microphone, like 57 through a great, you know, mic preamp. You know, gives you the full fidelity of a 57. You know, it may not be what, you know, some $1 million mic is, but it is the full 57. Right. And a decent A to D converter, I mean, you don't have to have anything crazy. I mean, these little interfaces that we use nowadays, whether it be Focusrite, SSL, UA, it doesn't make a difference. Everything is so good, the technology is not your problem. Yeah. And if you can get a clean piece down, it has that potential to live. And, you know, that is my job also, which is, I usually advise totally against what I've done my entire career, which is I usually record, mix, and co-produce most of the records that I do. I think it's a horrible idea. I just came up that way. And so there's a control factor in me being able to say, okay, I know where that snare is going to go, but if I hand it to you, that snare is still good enough as appropriate as it needs to be for you to not be painted into a corner. So with Aoife, I mean, a couple of people have been in the studio while we're working, and she'll just grab the acoustic mic and pull it towards her, and everybody's looking like, are you going to go out and move that? And I'm like, no. Does it sound bad?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. I'm like, well, why would I go touch it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if there's something wrong, my job is to know that.
Right.
I should, you know, and I also, you know, have to know, okay, well, there's too much low end on our guitar. You know, it's too close, it's too woofy. But if I take that off, the rest of the guitar's great, you know? So it's people want to be in the artist's way too much. And I was that person. And that's kind of the interesting thing with Aoife is with Americana and with what she's doing and being the singer-songwriter, I've learned how to just wait.
Mm-hmm.
If it's wrong, I got to step in, but I got to wait. So most of, if not all of our demos, and the new record we're working on now, which I'll play a little bit of different pieces of it. I don't want to play, obviously, too much of it because we're not finished with any of it. But I do want people to get that the last record and this record, we started this new record that we're working on now at the same time we were doing the other one.
Oh, wow.
This is the new record is a lot more orchestrally based.
Mm-hmm.
The whole middle of the record is big orchestral stuff.
Oh, cool.
So there's, you know, whole string sections, reed sections, horn sections. There's, you know, wacky guitars like we have on the other stuff. It's acoustic driven because that's who she is. And stuff that we cut literally in probably mid to late 2021 is on this new record that'll come out next year. So, you know, the time frames that are involved are, you know, 2 years. We've been on this particular second record for almost 2 years now. So that's a big deal. So I'm going to play you, so one of the songs often, I think there's a video and you can listen to the record on any of the streaming platforms or whatever, but.
I actually linked to the entire album
cool.
on YouTube in the description. So
yeah.
Look to the description, there's a link to the entire official album on YouTube.
It's worth a listen. It's worth it to just put some headphones on and understand in today's mechanical world, you know, this is a real artist. Everything is played. It still amazes me, and I make music every day, you know.
Well, it's a beautiful sounding record.
Yeah. So I'm gonna play. I'll play a little bit of. So this is the Pro Tools thing that's up here. Is the actual master mix. So it's pre-mastered. I generally don't care nor want to hear too many of the things after they're mastered. That's between them and, you know. I trust the people that we hire. That's
right.
I think that's a big factor in life.
Yep.
If you're second guessing your mastering person, you probably got the wrong one. And that's most pros that I know. I mean, whether it be Leslie, myself, you know, DJ Swivel, like we all use mastering engineers. Right. Whether the labels continue to let us do that, we'll see. But you know, as of right now, we still use them. So there's a purpose in that. Yep. But I'm going to play basically just her vocal. Acoustic guitar and keyboards, which would have been our original demo. That's what Aoife and I would have started with. So I'll just play a little bit of this here real quick. Let me see where I'm at in the song. I'm just going to boogie up a little bit here. Took me out back for a drink, showed me the heart on his sleeve. Love is a daily good thing. I see it in your smolder. I can feel it in my hand. So that piano, acoustic guitar, and vocal were literally cut as the demo. And what we'll generally do, that vocal melody and everything. That vocal, what we generally do is after we're done the song, we go back and we'll do like 3 passes, maybe 4. Mm-hmm. And there are times, obviously, that the original was better, and we'll leave it. We have no problem with that because I have a locked system for her. What that means is basically I have a Neve preamp that has notches. So they're fixed.
Right.
dB, they're fixed, everything.
Repeatable.
Yes. Everything on this record is Erlin mics, And so those are kind of specialized mics, but I have a pair of them, one for the acoustic, one, and they're marked. So she always sings on the same mic. The preamp has actually not been touched in 2 years, like the actual settings on it. So it literally plugs in. I go through that pre-writes Pro Tools. So I could literally go in and cut a vocal right now and match it to that vocal identical. Nice. So you can't really hear sonically the difference between the original. And if anybody, is a real classic rock buff, Tom Schultz, who did Boston.
Right.
That vocal on that record was the same way. He had a preamp and a vocal mic that was set up for almost 2 years. And, they'd come in, they'd run demos, and most of those are demo vocals too, because, if you have a fixed setup and you're not always changing the knobs and changing the EQ and everything else, you have a predictable outcome. And so with IFA, we do this for acoustic guitar, piano, and vocal. There's a whole rack of pre's that are literally just dedicated for that. My mics, the only thing that's a variable is how close I am to the mic or away from the mic. So anyways, let me take these out of solo real quick, just play you a little bit, just because it's always great. We were in Nashville doing we opened up the Americana Fest with this record, and Joe Henry, the other producer, and Aoife had never heard the tracks isolated. Like never heard it. And so it's, and that's, like I said, I do my work behind the scenes as a producer. Some people like to do their work out front. We were on stage and I played the bass, the percussion, and the drums, and like everybody was like, what is that? Because these guys have this pocket underneath. So anyways, I'll play a little bit of the same section here. So you always have to remember, this is the middle of COVID. So drums, bass, literally weeks apart. Right. Didn't play together. We still get comments about everybody thinks we did this as a group. Right. And there wasn't an iota of this that was together. The string stuffs were cut separate. Everything was pieced out. I just want to show you this photo. For all you guys that are, not that one, maybe this one. We'll see if this is the one. I don't remember which one was the last one, Brian. I think it was that one. Yeah. So this is, this looks crazy, doesn't it? So I think it's like a 54. This is some historical Slingerland kit that is, like I think it might be the only one in existence of its kind. But anyways, Jay's known for the drum set. That actually is kind of a mythical thing with him as well. But what I want you to see is where the drums for this record were recorded. Because when you listen to the record, you think everything is so polished and so perfectly whatever manicured into being this rich and thick sound. Ton of ribbon mics, obviously. That gives you a little bit more of the thickness that you would have. The drums are the factor. Real casting heads sometimes, depending on what is being cut. Again, he doesn't play traditionally, so he's got a ton of sticks and mallets and like weird, that little section that just played. There's no actual hi-hat there. He's playing the hi-hat part with like a hot rod that's chopped up on the snare. So, but this is his living room, literally. And I think people need to get, if you have some ingenuity and you understand, again, it's more of that getting it to tape cleanly. There's some great spaces. We're in Florida. Florida rooms are great for cutting drums. I actually, prefer to cut drums on concrete or, reflective surfaces anyways. But this is, and if you, in the photo, can kind of see the top of the photo, that's an outdoor umbrella. And all that's doing is breaking up. So ceilings are flat. So your two problems are flat floor, flat ceiling. And so that umbrella is literally there just to kind of knock it out a little bit. It's not the drumbrella that a couple of the producers have tried to coin over the years. That is a whole different thing because that you can move up and down. This is literally out of his backyard and stuck up next to the drums. But worked great, amazing. And as you're listening, if you guys listen to that record, the drums are predominantly mono on this record. Very little panning because as you can see with the setup, mono overhead, the room mics are all in really kind of quirky spots. It took me probably a week to figure out what I was going to do because I didn't know what to do with it when he, because it wasn't like stereo overheads. It wasn't the traditional thing that you would expect, and obviously we're involved with this recording process and making sure things are semi-clean. A couple of the vintagey mics, I had to RX a little. If you guys don't know what RX is, it's amazing.
Noise reduction.
Yeah, but it's so far beyond now. Lip smacks. You can literally highlight a vocal and take out all the mouth noises. It's every day for me. As a mixer, I'm in RX every day for sure. But this is a great example of being able to record, again, 3 Grammy nominations out of, drums that were cut in his bed in the living room. So it is completely viable.
In other words, you have no excuses for not making great sounds.
Yeah, because I think even if you took, again, artist. Yeah. If you put somebody talented behind, the little kids' drum sets, they can sound amazing.
Right.
Aoife came in the other day. Her daughter was going to a cello lesson. Eric is a renowned cello player, and it was a little kid's cello. I'd never seen one. I didn't even know they had them.
Yeah.
It's just a little tiny cello, and I said, I'm going to make Eric come in and play this thing because I want to record this little baby cello with a really great cello player, I think it would be a cool thing.
That would be great.
So let me quickly kind of talk about how we get files around. I think that's something that gets out of control that doesn't need to.
Well, yeah, you were talking about, exchanging files with the drummer and trying to figure that out, and that's one of the things that fascinated me about your whole experience with this project, especially during COVID, but even continuing now, that files have to move around to people. A session has to go out to have string arrangements added, all the rhythm section parts being piecemealed together. And you've got to control it all, and you've got to communicate with all those people and be sure that they get exactly the things that they need to do what they do and have it fit with everything else.
So, again, I'm not a file purist. That may irritate some people, but I prefer to, so I'll show you what I actually send them. I don't care if they do it at 44:116 or 96. I get 96 files sometimes from people that are really like, I gotta have the high tech. Great, whatever. I'm going to import your audio at 24:48. Don't care. What I'm usually doing is importing the wave. So I'll have a master session, and so when you're cutting drums, I send you stems, stereo guitar, stereo piano, stereo vocal, whatever I want you to hear. Those files, I will tell you, I just want the wave files back. I don't care what bit depth sample rate, but they need to be that length.
Right.
And that way I can just import. All I do is lock the fronts of all the files together. Life is good, and there's no drift, there's no anything in these computers anymore. So we really don't have to worry about, and because I'm basically recreating a new audio file, I don't have to worry about any sync issues or any of that stuff. Knock on something, I haven't had in years to fish around to line something up.
Right.
And even if I did, the reference file, and a lot of people like to send me Pro Tools sessions back. So what they'll do is they'll just record it in their Pro Tools, send me the session. So I have what if that's the case, and maybe I got wild tracks, where they did the bass and it's like 15 seconds too long. So what I'll do is I'll chop them all to be the same length.
Yep.
And if I need to, I can import the session data from the originals to make sure that they're in the space they need to be in. And most of you guys hopefully know that if you use Broadcast Wave, when you record And when I stem that original one, that is actually timestamped to where it lives, which means if in turn they keep to that length, I can just timestamp stuff back in if I wanted to.
Well, not to get exceedingly nerdy.
No, it's all good.
But there are all sorts of different ways to interchange files with people. You know, there's the Pro Tools session format. There's AAF and OMF and a lot of these things that allow you to get a session back and forth between different DAWs or between different studios. And you hit on a couple of things that really kind of simplify it. And I know that we have people joining us who have taken audio workstations and moved on quite a bit from there, and people who probably haven't even made it to audio workstations yet. But the first thing you said about just give me a file that starts and ends with the reference tracks that I gave you, and I can drop it in, and it's going to be sample accurate aligned. That'll work between any two DAWs.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter what you're doing. And if you need to do sample rate conversion because they gave you a 44.1 file or a 96K file, it still is going to line up just fine. And then you talked about importing session data from one Pro Tools track to another. Incredibly powerful technique for taking something from one Pro Tools session and bringing it into the master session. And then the time stamping of the broadcast wave file, so even if something is a little weird, you can always put it back to the same point in the timeline where it was originally recorded. So if people are paying just the least bit of attention to what you've asked them to do,
it goes well.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the end of the day, you got to use your ears. And if something doesn't sound right, then we're going to nudge. We'll move it. It's not the end of the world. It sometimes is politically better not to freak a bass player out. I'm going to pick on bass players, but because this last record, I remember I got a phone call, and there's the bass player, and he's like, "I will recut everything if you need me to." And that's a bad thing right off. And sure enough, he's like, "I left the light in my kitchen on." And so he had, a little buzz in his bass the whole time. I was like, I got you, I got RX, done. And then I got a track the other day. I can't remember what we were working on. We were working on somebody else's song, but anyways, I got a track the other day, and the guy goes, the bass track is noisy because it was raining. I was like, really? And of course everybody's like, what's that noise? I was like, oh, it's raining. So, but you can't get totally caught up in the semantics. Now, I talk about it because I deal with it every day. We have a conversation about this, half of what we just said, some people got like one piece of that. You have to understand all your options.
Right.
Which is, session data, time stamping, OMF stuff if you really wanted to go down the rabbit hole. Music doesn't OMF as much as post does, but it definitely is an option. There are some advantages to other DAWs with certain things. Example, if Aoife wants to hear a song at a different tempo, I'll basically bounce all the tracks out as continuous wave files, and I'll drop them into Luna, and I can switch the tempo to anything you want. I mean, I can go 30 beats per minute faster or slower, like whatever. It does it better than any of the other DAWs that I've heard, which is crazy because I love to mix in Luna. They're just not there with what we can do in Pro Tools. I'm a folder junkie, like you guys will see in a minute, but understanding all the options, that's what we're teaching you guys. We're teaching you guys all of the pieces. You're not going to use all the pieces. I can't even think of the last time I opened an OMF anything. And for me and for what I'm doing, us dealing with remote musicians is the norm now.
Right.
They do not have, for the most part, the experience that you would like. So you have to go way back and be like, here's the deal, what are you going to record in? And I will usually ask them that, and it's either Pro Tools or Logic are the two common ones. And I'm like, great, just grab those files, drag and drop them in. As long as you record to it, I will, just make sure I have isolation, and please teach everybody how to maintain mono or stereo compatibility. I don't need stereo kick drums for all 50 tracks, you know. There's a little check button in Pro Tools and Logic, and I'm actually going to show you that because it's actually kind of important in Pro Tools. It gets blown by in Pro Tools a lot, but the way that I do files is quicker, and you have to go into your session setup and check a box to make sure that it maintains stereo compatibility. Otherwise, you get 2 mono files, and that Pro Tools defaults to that, and that is a problem. So anyways, on the screen, I don't know if we can jump to the screen real quick. I just wanted you to see, this is literally a song that is not even, we're not even settled on it yet. It was labeled New Piano V3 Vocal Fix because we changed the vocal on it. How you label, I have, this one's a new song, but I have old versions, the original version, this version, and I have a version elsewhere that's a different timing that I took out of this folder because I don't even want to mix it up. But anyways, I'm going to open this up. This is us at our beginning stage, okay? So this song is in its infancy. We are going to, at this point, it's been farmed out to a different piano player. I don't think Aoife wants to play piano on the track. So we'll get some fancy-dancy piano player to do, you know, something special on it. It's been so we used the bass player for Andrew Bird and the drummer for Dawes, a couple different bands, really creative dudes that did the other rhythm tracks for this new record. So we sent them the tracks as well, and then who knows? 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks because we got to get this record done. But we'll get files from them. I'll start trying to piece it all together, figure out what we need to do. Drums are always a concern because all the other drums were recorded with me. Mm-hmm. These new ones won't be. Oh. But here's the deal. There's this thing called Trigger. You can use multiple versions. All of the drums are already sampled and in, so I can have the same kick drum sound on all of the stuff. Right. Snare drums get tricky, but for the most part, I can make it feel like it's the same drum set, even though we're cutting it literally 2 years later. And that's, you know, kind of some of the magic. So both sessions I brought up, the last song and this one, if you guys notice, there's a template. I am a template junkie. When we record, we have templates. When we mix, I take all your either session data or audio and I drop it into my template. And everything is pre-built. My master bus is pre-built. Everything is always on as far as that goes. Her vocal, this is in every song, whether I'm doing gospel song, pop song, whatever, everybody goes into the same situation, but I have a bunch of plugins that are on but not active. What that means is basically I've already preset on that reverb channel that you guys are looking at. There's Pure Plate, there's Vintage Verb, UAD Chambers, the Hitsville, which is the Motown, and then Seventh Heaven, which is what I normally use because I use Burkastis in real world. Right. So they're already pre-built. If I don't like the Seventh Heaven, all I do is, you know, hold down Control and Command and I click another reverb. I turn one off, I turn one on. I don't have to rebuild. I don't have to go to my menu because look, if I go to this menu over here, I click and I go over here, let's just go to EQs. Oh,
don't show us this.
Yes, and then just literally, I don't want to sift through this, you know? Like, I don't want to do that with anything. So what I'm going to do is, as much as, when I'm not on a record, not on a song, on an off day, whatever, I am working on building my template. I'm working on building guitar sounds with new guitar pedals or whatever it is. It's an ongoing battle. But there's a vocal master folder. There are the comp effects vocals. These are all my time-based, including stereo widener. 2 throws. And what a throw is basically instead of going through an aux channel, which some of you may or may not know, where I'm going to send it over to a reverb. A lot of times if you want like a delay, you want a word to tail off. Those are audio channels that have effects on them. So all I do is cut the audio, option drag a copy of it up, then I just get that one word that will trickle out. So those are built into the template. Her vocal lives here. Everything's great with that. And then so every song ends up being the same. Because this is so new, I don't even have verse chorus because I'm not sure we're 100% locked in. So what I do is I have a start and an end point. I should probably explain real quickly the click track. This is an interesting thing with the click track. We don't use accents.
Well, as you
Yeah,
do
go
that, I knew this was going to happen.
We're gonna run out of time.
We're running out of time.
Of course we will.
I knew this was about 3 town halls
Yeah,
worth
that's all
of
good.
conversation, but yeah, tell us about that. Do we have any questions from? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Go- we
hold
go
the
with
thought
the
about the
questions.
click
No,
track.
we can
Let's
go
go
with
with
questions
the
for sure.
question.
Yeah.
We have several.
First, you guys hearing me? Okay.
Yeah,
cool. As far as your timing, we're going to keep going just a little bit longer. There were issues with the internet here and the stream, but we have people who are now engaged and everyone is loving it.
Perfect.
But we have, let's see who it was here. It was Fake Jake asked, what's the best way to record electric guitar when you're dealing with remote recordings?
So I'm assuming you're asking to send to somebody, would be my guess. There's a bunch of ways you can do this. Zoom is awesome, and I'll tell you why. They've come a long way with their audio. I use a plugin called Audio Movers, which allows me to hear or send higher res audio. I can basically do it as a 320 MP3, which is definitely good enough quality. I mix remotely probably 95% of the time, which means that if somebody wants to cut a guitar, I can actually be there while they're cutting a guitar. Now, I'm not getting their audio files. Their audio files are going to live on their computer, but I can interact with them and hear what they're doing in real time. So that's one option. Less is always going to be more. And this is just a personal thing. I don't need 55 mics on your guitar amp. I need a microphone. I probably don't even want a room mic. That would be my choice, because 9 times out of 10, the phase is so weird that I don't end up using them. And again, and I'm not taking it away from a great room, but guitar amps definitely, and it is genre specific too. I mean, if you're doing a metal project, you're going to jam the mic up in there. You're going to have 57, probably either a Royer or a 421. Yeah. For what I do, it is very, I'll just show you the setup for her. Every guitar kind of goes through the same thing, which would be that.
Yep.
So that is, and you can exchange this for whatever microphone you have, but it is literally probably an inch off the center of the cone. You can go left or right, doesn't make a difference. You just don't want to be dead center because it's the brightest, so I want it a little bit darker. That's a particularly dark mic. That's a FET 47. And it's literally guitar right into it. So something very simple. Let it breathe a little bit. You know, don't be like on the grill cloth. Like, speakers like to breathe, and people tend to forget that. But I would back it out a little bit and keep it as you know, clean. And I mean clean in the what you're recording, not in the actual sound. Right. But make sure that you're not adding distortion with the preamp because you think your guitar's that distorted, because that tends to be trouble for us later.
Now, would you want a DI track as well so you could reamp it?
That is a tough question. I was anti-DI for a long time. Mm-hmm. I cut DIs now because what I will do is if we're cutting a sound live, if I even screw up the timing, what if we change the timing? So I will cut a DI. There's some problems in Pro Tools where if we don't always leave the DI track out, if we hide the DI track and we make an edit, the DI track and that don't hit. And I've been burned on this. Yep. So that's why I stopped doing DIs. If you are in control of your session, DI, just for the sake you can reamp. I reamp through the pedal board. Right. So when she's gone, I can literally play that guitar and retweak all the pedals, do a different sound, do alternate stuff, whatever.
Cool.
And don't be afraid of plugins. They're great.
Yay.
Yep.
Next question.
It doesn't seem we have questions, but we definitely have a lot of people interested in what you said. Somebody's commenting on your MPEG cab. Interesting.
And, it is, which is good that they're commenting, because that is, if they know, that's a bass cab. Yeah. And it's a 15-inch speaker. For her, she likes, and I like, for Americana, a darker sound. It's a slower response. she does a lot of finger stuff. So right now I'm using a Bad Cat. For this record, I'm using a Bad Cat as opposed to an Orange, and I'm using a 412 Boogie cabinet for this record.
Very cool. Well, one comment from Michael says, "I love it." And then we have Charlie chiming in here with, "How would you make space in the center of double-tracked rhythm guitars to fit vocals and/or lead in the space without making the rhythm guitars sound thin?"
So whether it's 300 or 500, you know, there's going to be a low mid thing in the guitar. People want to filter out all the low end on guitars. I tend to be the opposite of that. I'm going to take a little tuck of the low mid stuff, but I actually make guitars brighter usually to get them out of the way of like even in a rock song. I mean, you know, if you listen to Aerosmith or you listen to even a Zeppelin track, even the old stuff, there's like a top and this low mid thing, and the vocal, because it's around 2K, is going to sit in this hole.
Yep.
So it's not as bad. I mean, you know, I was with Deep Purple for like almost 12 years, like, you know, just over, it was a long period of time. We did a lot of records. And I was with, you know, Richie Blackmore, Satriani, and Steve Morris, and all of them like to play loud. All of them like to be heard. And, you know, when you have a Hammond organ that's screaming through a Marshall as well, what they're asking is an appropriate question: where do you find the space?
Yeah.
It is little contours. It's not the big moves like I'm going to pull all 6K out of the guitar, and that's what I think everybody tries to do, is they try and make the guitar whole and then put the vocal in it, and it's really not that. You just do a little nip and tuck to figure out, because look, every song, even if it's the same singer, is going to have a different frequency response.
Right.
So like I remember we were doing this song Bloodsucker where for Deep Purple, where Ian is singing so high that I had to actually bring the guitar top end down because he was going to be on top of that. So it's always a push-pull. Don't take a track, copy a track, and call that a double track. That is not a double track. You need to play this, human play it, twice. Vocal, same thing. Don't try and copy it. It never turns out the way everybody wants it to. 2 performances. People also think you need to put 55 guitars on guitar stuff.
Right.
A lot of the AC/DC stuff, most of the Purple stuff, 1 or 2 guitars goes a long, long way if it's executed right.
Right.
And it's actually more powerful to use less distortion. I know we don't have time, but triangle wave, this is buzzy and gets in your way. This is good and gives you power. So like the more modulation you have on the input, the worse it gets, unless you're doing metal. Wholly different ball. That's a whole nother thing. You know, we can talk about the Trivium thing or something some other time.
Wow.
Oh, we have more.
I'm good. I'm good.
Michael says, for vocals, is there a right way to stack vocals? And he wanted to clarify by saying, meaning if I stack them, I think, should I pan left, right, and center? And finally, how would you go about leveling the music? For example, making nothing is too overpowered and underpowered.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a music history thing. So Ozzy, Sabbath, all those guys quad-tracked a lot of vocals. So basically, they're recording a lead vocal and they're not panned. And that gives you this chorusy effect, and it gives you power. So things don't really mess with that. Even in one of the songs we're not going to get to, but I was going to bring up, I have, so one part of this, Aoife's got a regular vocal, and then one part she's triple tracked, and she's only panned out a little bit. You don't go hard left, hard right when you're trying to stack vocals. Now, if you're doing backgrounds, whole different ballgame.
Right.
I generally don't go past like, 11 and 2. I leave that for the lead. Everything else can kind of fan within there. One of the things I'm just symmetrical. It's a weird thing. I don't know if it's a little touch OCD or whatever, but
Really?
I always track 2 of everything. And when I say I track 2 of everything, if I do a guitar, I'm going to do 2 guitars. Now, with Aoife, what we do is we always play an inversion. and play it differently.
Right.
Because Americana, I don't want the traditional strummy left-right thing. That's
Right.
like pop Americana. What we're doing is we'll play a part finger picking. The next side may be capoed and at a different inversion
Right.
and then played, or we'll retune. We'll actually use a different tuning on the guitar to play that part, so we have contrast between our left and right. You always want this like movement thing to happen. If you're doing big static vocals, guitars, anything like that, the idea is you don't want it too far away where it sounds like a delay, but you also don't want it too close that it starts to phase. And that is on the artist, unfortunately. Otherwise, what we're going to do is every other word we're going to cut and nudge. And trust me, when you spend about 10 hours doing that, you're going to wish that you had an artist that could do it. And that was the thing about the 70s guys. Yeah. Ian Gillan, the first time I quad-tracked his vocal, I was astonished. I'd never heard something so perfectly doubled that wasn't phasey. He heard and knew how to stack vocals every single time. So, I mean, and that's not the answer anybody wants to hear, but it's like it really does originate with the singer to be able to stack vocals. I did a lot of, pop stuff. I did Backstreet and those kind of things, and we were just crunching through vocals, and then we would line them up, and we would tune them, and we would do all that. And that's the mechanical sound of pop music, is us manipulating, auto-tuning, doing all that stuff. When you listen to somebody double track, even two, astonishingly bigger than having 10 vocals all mechanically put together. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, but.
Michael follows up with another message here. My apologies, for this typo. I was typing too fast. I'm trying to type the question in. So I think you got the message across as our viewers were looking for.
Cool.
So with that, I give you about 5 more minutes to wrap it up, and then I think we're going to move on.
Super. Well, first of all, promise us you'll come back and talk about this more.
Whatever you guys want. I mean,
Awesome.
we got tons of record. We can talk gospel all day too.
I'm going to finish with a selfish question.
Sure.
So there was a famous jazz saxophonist in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s named Paul Desmond. Mm-hmm. He had a beautiful, pure, dry sound. Mm-hmm. Someone once described it. He ended up hating this description by the time he was very old. Somebody likened his sound to the taste of a dry martini. Yeah. Which actually was a pretty good description, but he got tired of it. Aoife's voice has some of that same character. She can sing a straight tone that is just pianissimo and pure and has not edge, but a texture to it that you could just about reach out and touch. Mm. And it's just a glorious sound, and she uses it and leverages it to great dramatic and musical effect. How did you capture that sound? What was it about your recording process that captured and enhanced her ability to create that really pure, dry, expressive sound?
It's funny you mention that, because it's pretty heavily affected. Which is, I mean, the illusion of it being dry is the intent, but it is so far from dry, it's ridiculous. So like even this one, I'll solo this vocal up here just so you can hear how, and this is pretty normal setting here. I'll just play a little bit of her vocal by itself. Once in a lifetime, let me get rid of the click. The power is ours, but we'd rather stare at our phones. Talking about. So there are 2 delays and a reverb and a widener on it. The idea is to find the magic bullet, which is the vocal comes in and you bring the room to the vocal. Pre-delay is the other thing. Mm-hmm. When you run reverbs, just for example with this one, this is Seventh Heaven. So I have it, I always time everything too. I mean, I'm big on timing delays and reverbs and stuff. sometimes you need to go a little while, but for the most part I do. But this is locked to the tempo. So when I move this gives me wherever, I want to generally be around 30 to 60 milliseconds minimum on a vocal. Anything that's melodic and moves, I want a longer pre-delay. Drums, I don't want a pre-delay. I don't want to hear the, I want it to literally come at the same time as the impact, I mean, within milliseconds. So, but for vocals, one of the big things is you can have a big space. Like I've got almost 2.5 seconds, 2.15,
yeah.
So, I mean, this is over a 2-second reverb that's on her vocal. So the tail is pretty long, but because of the pre-delay, she happens, then the effect happens. That is always the best way to get it away. And delays, and delays. Delays live like that echo boy that's here, just so you guys can see what's happening. The echo boy that's here, it's 100% wet because it's on an aux track.
Right.
It's also filtered to not have the high end off the vocal.
Right.
So the vocal happens, and then the delay is actually a little muddier, but it's also stereo. So the delay, it's not ping pong, it's just a stereo delay, so that when it happens, it almost pulls like this.
Right.
And that gives you the illusion like we're in a normal space. And then I always use tons of saturation. But
So almost everything that you just described is a way of separating the dry vocal from the time-based effect.
yeah.
So the pre-delay, the panning, the filter, all of these things are ways that you can get the sort of lush reverb happening without muddying up the vocal. It's that separation factor, and you're doing it in multiple ways,
Right.
simultaneously.
Well, and the other thing is so I'll just click through her plugins. So I could take all these plugins off, trust me. She is absolutely astonishing. Like when you go in the room, you hear the same thing. What I'm doing is pushing it into this realm, like what they were asking before. How do you get a vocal to sit with this much density?
Yep.
And so the plugins are what allow me to do that. So filter out real quick. I mean, this is it. I mean, literally 88. This is a dynamic EQ, so it's when she hits 8K real hard, it just dips a tiny bit. It's not always on. That's probably one of the newest Swiss Army knives that all of us have. When I play this, you'll see it'll play. Barely any compression on here right now. If she starts to jam, which she does later on in the song, that's going to go to 7 dB of compression. But that compressor is picked because what it does. There's no, like, you can't pull out some generic compressor. I see people do this all the time. They have, like, I'm not picking on it, but they have like a digi compressor. They have a waves compressor. And one of the things older engineers have is we only had a couple, so we had to choose the right one for the right sound. The Blue Stripe is one of everybody's go-to vocal compressors, 1176. I don't like LE2s on her vocal. I've been through everything, Fairchild, like the whole thing. Yep. So she goes into this, usually between 5 to 7 dB of compression is where I want to be. Mog EQ I usually run on if I needed it, I don't on this song, but this is already preset to have a little bit of 2.5, so that's that bite on the vocal, and the air on the vocal is 20K. The de-esser, it's an old school one, so it's a DBX 902 basically on steroids. Great de-esser there. Soothe is a whole conversation that we should have like a whole 45 minutes to explain, but this takes resonant frequencies out of stuff. So if there's like if she holds on like a lower note, there could be a little honk that this will, and when you play this, you'll see it'll start to, maybe you will, you probably won't on this one, but it's too quiet right now, but it'll start to dip out any of those resonant frequencies. Then I run C6, which is a multiband, which is just, I'm talking, this thing is moving just like this. It's just kind of like wobbling a little bit, maybe a dB and a half, but what it's doing is just leveling that frequency out. And then it comes out, that's it. Everything's pre-built, preset. That's what pushes it in the mix.
You reach for specific plugins the way a guitarist reaches for a specific guitar to get a sound.
I spend so much time, like it's not on here right now, but I spend time working I don't have like presets. If you look at I don't have any presets. but I've tweaked everything
Right.
for that vocal.
Yeah.
I've tweaked everything. If you look at my guitar presets, they're tweaked for a guitar. I really spend time also. It's part of the job. I get every new plugin there is. SSL sends me stuff on a daily basis, and I make sure, and I see. So I actually used to use S1, and then I used the German guys. What was that company?
Sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Anyways, I used a different imager. SSL turned me onto their imager. The other, that's all I've been using.
Wow.
The thing is amazing because it doesn't get phasey.
I'm gonna close by breaking the guitar analogy of reaching for a specific guitar. Having a whole rack of guitars doesn't do a guitarist any good if they can't play the guitar in the first place. So everything that you're learning about how to use the compressor that you have is essential before you start choosing from that rack of a million different plugins.
Learn what an attack and a release time does.
Heck yeah.
It is really hard to hear early on in your career, but it is the biggest amount of manipulation you have on a vocal.
Yep.
You can make boring vocals great. You can make too excited vocals boring. Like, this is why every article you hear somebody talking about compressors and vocals, it's always, I'm squashing it. And you see us putting 10 dB of compression, but it doesn't sound like it. And that's because we're manipulating.
Yep.
Cool.
Wow. Darren, thank you so much for sharing
absolutely.
this with us. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us today. I'd like to extend thanks to the Audiovisual Technologies class here in show production for providing production support, and their course director, John Kost. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with you. The Audio Production Town Hall is here on a monthly basis, typically fourth Monday of every class that you have at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, talking about something different every month. So subscribe, tune in, watch FS1 for announcements of next month's and the month after there. And thanks. You all have a great afternoon and evening.